could start with a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. Stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the order, please.
Mr. Benton?
Here.
Mrs. Boer? Here. Mrs. Davis? Here. Mrs. Thomas? Here. Mr. Swager?
Here.
Good evening and welcome. I do have one point to bring up to you. I just learned this late this afternoon by way of announcement. If you remember back before the COVID pandemic hit, there was a grand celebration of life planned for the late Don Jakeway and his wife, and now Don Jr.'s wife has passed as well. They have rescheduled that celebration for August 2nd, so you might want to note that at Mott's Military Museum. And I'll get you more information on it, but it just hit my desk right before the end of this day. And I just wanted you to put that on because Don was beloved to us and a great American hero, and we can all take part in that celebration down at Mott's Museum, which is an excellent place to visit, by the way. Wonderful museum down there. So anyway, I want to put that on your radar, having received that late today. In speaking with Mr. Swager and Mrs. Davis regarding topics this evening, one of the issues that I want to just briefly discuss here is as we look to next year, what will next year look like? Okay, I get that question a lot, and I had planned on getting a letter out to the staff and parents, but I wanted to make sure that as a board and administration, we're all together with respect to one major part of that, and that's online education and our JLA program. If you remember, our Johnny Learning Academy was created specifically in response to this COVID pandemic in order to provide the maximum level of direct interaction between teachers and students. That was something we were all adamant about going into this year. It has proven to be very successful. However, it does not replace good quality in-person education. We know that's the most effective. If anything we've learned from this pandemic, it's that. And so my recommendation for consideration is that we no longer run the Johnny Learning Academy. Why? Because it is a resource. It does take resources to provide the extra teachers. It does spread some of our teachers very thin in two different directions. And quite frankly, from hearing from a lot of parents, they're ready for kids to get back to school. So while we have not conducted any formal surveys or anything, it just seems the general consensus is to move on. Most other districts I've spoken with, certainly in Licking County, plan on not having the online programming and returning to the online programming that they had prior to this year. For us, we have our peak learning program. Some people still know that as JOLT, but our peak online program has been used by some in the past. It is self-paced and it is somewhat monitored by teachers who are assigned as the official graders, but it is strictly for students who can handle structure at home and can handle the self-pacing it takes to successfully complete that. So while we have had some students successfully use that program, we find that more often than not, it is very challenging for those that use that, and therefore we do not allow them to continue on it if they're not making good use of the time and completing the work. We want the students to learn, and that's why we're here. So all that I present to you this evening for just general discussion on your thoughts relative to ending this Johnny Learning Academy. We have put in place, and some of you have asked me, the learning management system, Schoology, that will be continued. We will continue to use that in many different ways. Teachers have found it an extremely useful tool to help them training in their classroom, not just for online education. It's become quite a repository for lessons and resources that they can quickly draw up when they need it. And so we certainly recommend its continued use, and will continue to provide additional professional development on various aspects of that learning management system for both teachers and parents, because parents can more easily access information through that system as well. So that's the general nature of my question. I just want to make sure we're on board before I communicate anything out to the public relative to our planning for next year.
We've got a lot of questions, little questions, some questions.
No, I feel that probably the Johnny Learning Academy is time for a sunset on that. I don't see any need to continue that for resources. We could rechannel those resources to other things that are more timely and germane at the moment. The PEAK program, I hope we continue that. And certainly Schoology, I've heard some good things, but I also maybe think it's time we ask some questions about Schoology. What is good about it? What can we improve on it? I don't know that. So if we have any input from anyone who's involved with Schoology or has students in it, most of them are. But at any rate, if you have some suggestions, then we ought to be looking at that and tweak it a little bit for the next school year.
No doubt. We want to continue to improve all of our resources and want that input as to how anything can be better used. So certainly
I
appreciate
know
that.
Ann and I
Ruth Ann.
had recommended a few things on Schoology to see if it's possible. You know, just some more advantages for the parents on the side of Schoology. What can we utilize that for? That's really, for me as a parent, sometimes I don't, as much as I ask my son, you know, what'd you do today? If there was a better resource, if we could use Schoology, that I could track some of that a little better as a parent, it'd be nicer. I know it's a little work. Some classes it's easier than others to keep on, but right now the Schoology this year for me, some teachers had online and in person, and the Schoology was used at the online version, but it didn't match up to the in-person one, so it wasn't as useful for me. You know, as a parent, it didn't always match up where they were, so it was a little hard to utilize the material that they put on there. So if we could, as we get less kids, you know, no kids on the JLA, if we utilize that to where parents could actually follow along a little easier. Just from a study standpoint, you know, when we had math tests coming up or anything like that, if I could go on there and see where they're at in the booklet a little better, you know, and see some of that, that'd be more useful.
Yeah,
as we
one
shared.
piece to that, and I'm glad you brought it up, Tim. One piece to that is our continual analysis of our progress book versus PowerSchool platform. As you know, Learning Management System is owned by PowerSchool, and we use progress books. So if you have people accessing progress book, and I guess the goal would be to have a one-stop shop for parents, so to speak, where they can go in and find resources. And I think we've headed toward that. And please, I want to open this up to any input from the principals as well as what they've seen this year and how we're progressing with the communication piece through the learning management system versus our old ways. There's a mix still, I know. But where would you say we are with respect to using learning management for parent opportunity to access programs and student information?
I mean, my experience, I use Progress Book to check grades and see where his assignments, you know, what's been turned in, but then I'm trying to use Schoology to actually for content, you know, so that's kind of how my experience is for it.
A lot of times when I see, if I go to Schoology and I see an assignment out there, I'll say, here's an assignment, and she'll say, no, that's not us, that's the JLA. So
Right.
that's the only thing.
It's confusing, being the first year of the program.
Yeah,
Certainly.
and I mean, it's a learning curve, and we're doing the best that we can. Was that a 3-year contract that we did with Schoology, or 2-year?
I believe we did annual. Debbie, do you remember, or Kim, on our contract? Did we do a 3-year?
Pretty sure.
Okay.
3 1 year.
So we've done 1 year. So we should really like sense adjust it, start looking and having the principals collaborate to see, with the teachers, what can be added or what
Yep.
they're looking for. And sure.
So it's safe to say we will be enriching Schoology, because that was the big
Yes,
concern
indeed.
I heard from parents was it didn't have enough information. They would have wanted more to track the students, so.
I think that's right.
And then will our kids have access to that throughout the summer? Like, because I know there's some really good resources and apps I'd love my kids to be able to use. I assume until they're assigned to a new class, they'll be able to log in on there. Oh. Okay. Like iReady and stuff, they can still get through there and use that in the summer. Okay. Right.
Bless you.
Right. Right, but still, the majority of the summer, they can still get on there. Great. Okay.
It sounds like everybody's on board with,
Sunset
General
and JLA.
direction.
Yes.
okay, I'll prepare a communication. And I would expect going into next year, folks, that, we'll still have some protocols in place. Obviously, we want to promote good, healthy hygiene. We'll still use sanitizers, but short of a resurgence of some sort, I would expect that the social distancing, the masks, and those types of things would not be, we would not be under orders for such, obviously unless necessary, but masks are becoming more and more of a voluntary thing, it looks like. So I would expect that. So I want to just generally describe where we're heading and have one more meeting with the superintendent of the county and just double check any other unique plans that are going on. We share greatly with each other throughout the county and with the health department. So once I have that final meeting, then I'll be putting this out to the public and sharing my thoughts with respect to fall. Thank you. The next topic asked to be put on the discussion for this work session relates to facilities. And there are three projects within the school district that have been brought to our attention. Some are board requested, others are staff requested. And so I've been asked to put all three on here just for a general discussion this evening. The first has been in the works for well over a year. They've been doing cost studies and whatnot to place a pole facility, I think roughly 90 feet by 120 feet, pole facility that would span over the existing batting cage and dugout, home dugout at our baseball field. Why? It is a place where our baseball and softball teams can work year-round in their hitting, throwing, and our youth league certainly would be getting coaching as well and support from our high school players and building up their program, so to speak. A big plus to this idea that's been brought to us is that we'd have less activity with balls flying around in our gyms and hitting our floors, hitting our walls, and such. The coaches have been pretty good about watching that. We've had maintenance put proper netting up to help protect our facilities as much as possible, but we do know that kids are kids, and errant balls do fly. And even those plastic jug balls can leave marks and things. So I know that's been a concern with some board members. And so, Mr. Swager, you have more information relative to that particular piece. We might hit these one at a time, I'd suggest.
Well, on that one, I think we've been discussing, we just need to have further discussion what we want to do, if it's worth it, if we want to invest in something like that. It's going to be a hefty investment, and we have other options out there. Currently, I think one of the challenges we have is they can't put the net up in the gymnasium when October starts. Baseball starts their off-season throwing, hitting in October. So I think they struggle with being able to put their netting up at that time because they don't have time. They can't leave it up. So currently, we either don't practice or don't hit, don't throw, or they pay out of pocket to go to like a TAD Sports or one of the other indoor facilities. I'm sure softball is doing the same thing for that season. The other challenge, though, is it's got that investment down there of the turf, of the indoor hitting net, and the sun is beating on that thing, and it's wearing out that turf along with the netting and everything else. It was donated, I don't know, 5 years ago?
4 or 5.
4 or 5 years ago that was installed. So again, this is one of those where we get, something's been installed and donated to the district, and will at some point be expected to replace it if we're not maintaining it. So it's a struggle in my mind because it's a large cost. What do? Do we keep going like we are? I don't know how long that's going to last down there, but will there be expectations? Or do we look at other avenues to where we can put baseball, softball, give indoor place for other things? You could do some one-on-one drills for, I'm sure, football, soccer. People, you know how it is. People will utilize it. But let's not fool anyone. This would be pretty much baseball and softball. That would be utilizing the indoor facility. We could get use out of it for cheerleading and other activities. But I really just wanted to put it out there because, we went out for bid, we got a bid back in, it's expensive. So what do we do? And, I don't know what the will of the board is.
Did we get more than, I think last time we got 2 bids or 1 bid?
We got 2 this time, but the low bid was not bonded, correct?
Doesn't
So
meet the
therefore, we
criteria
really
for
had
the
one
bid.
legal bid to utilize. Is that correct?
How about fundraising? Do you think that those organizations that would use it could help? We've done some things recently for shared costs. Do you think that they would be open to try to help us raise part of funds for doing that? We've done that with the band, two in the past, and we've done that with different entities. Do you think that that's a possibility, kind of a shared expense?
I would certainly hope so. I mean, I think all of our organizations here expect to somewhat share in some of these if we're going to enhance the program like this, because that's what it is.
That's what
It's an enhancement to the program because it allows them to practice October, November, December, January, and February when we're currently not practicing, or on a nice day, they're out hitting on our football turf because that's what they do. When the weather's nice enough, they're out hitting off the turf. So at least that's what I've seen before. So that's usually how we're utilizing that right now. I don't know how to set that dollar amount being realistic as well, but I think we certainly could reach out to them and discuss how do we cost share in something of this nature? How do you fundraise for this? Because if we really want to take our baseball and softball programs to that next level, they need indoor hitting plate space. So,
Is there any room at the north end of North Campus there? I mean, can we do anything in that area rather than down here that would, the size of the building, would it accommodate other things except baseball and softball? So we could get more athletic competitions in there or more preparations in there that, again, as Alan said, fundraising will be important if we're going to try to meet at least a co-op.
right.
Because
And that's-
$100,000 is a big number.
And that's where I've gone back and forth is that the best place for it? Maybe
I
not.
don't know.
But we're also going to protect the investment that's already there. So if we build another building somewhere else, that turf and that indoor hitting still remains exposed.
True.
And,
True.
They're right at the
That turf
field.
only has a certain lifespan, you found out with turf anyway, so you got 5 years on the turf. Is that turf similar to the other turf we have, where we're looking at 8 to 10 year?
It's probably going to wear a little worse because it is put down on concrete. There's no padding underneath. It will take more wear, and it's not the caliber of turf that we put up on the football
So
field.
then the turf is going to, by the time we.
The baseball
basically
shoes,
get the
you're
building,
wearing
turf
it
is
quicker.
gonna be
And that's
gone.
where we're at if we put it out. And as the sun damages that stuff as much as anything. So if we're going to, that's where we really need to reach out is if you're going to do one, do you do them together? Do you reach out to the baseball and softball and say, hey, you guys replace the turf? Those types of conversations, I think we need to start having them to see realistically what could occur down there. Or if it's just not financially feasible.
Well, and it only takes one visit to the gymnasiums when they're hitting the balls in there, and it makes you realize that we've got to find some way to change that behavior. I can see they need to do that, but in the gym, so.
So that's the challenge. I mean, where else do you hit?
I don't know.
If we don't hit in the gym, we don't have an indoor place for them
That's
to
true.
hit. So then they're paying
That is true.
out of pocket to go somewhere else, and then obviously, on a coach's salary, that doesn't go very far, very many indoor hitting opportunities.
Tim, I didn't memorize that spreadsheet on athletics, but are the programs, baseball and softball, are they growing exponentially so we can see that this might be a good investment because we see the programs growing so
I'd like,
handsomely?
Madeline, can you address that? I know baseball was growing at the lower level. I don't know about the 8th, 9th grade classes coming through.
What else can that be used for down there, Madeline? What other sports could enjoy that and alleviate some other space for other?
It will depend on the dimensions. I think we had talked about possibly wrestling being able to use that space. And I'm not sure that would be possible, but again, the space that we would be freeing up would allow wrestling to be in other locations.
Any girls' sports?
Cheer probably would be able to use that space for rehearsal if it were warm enough and safe enough.
So it sounds like to me that it's all events. So maybe it's not just the baseball and softball people that we talk to, but perhaps it's the whole, athletic boosters that we need to bring in on this, since it's going to benefit everyone, and see what we can do from our fundraisers.
Sure.
Get some ideas.
I sounds great. Is that something you'd like myself or Mr. Dixon or Madeline to reach out?
Yeah, I would like for you to do that.
Okay.
Personally.
I think we need to test those waters and see what kind of interest is there. That could help us make the decision.
See what kind of money they think that there's a possibility of raising.
Okay.
I dream of the day when this community can have a field house to serve the needs of all the children. I mean, younger, school age, all that. We do overuse our facilities quite a bit, as you know, and it is a struggle for the athletic department and to schedule everything. We use our elementary, middle, and high. So someday we may be fortunate enough to have a large
Could you
facility.
add some land acquisitions to
Yeah,
your
you
dreams?
gotta have the
So
land
we
to
have a
build it
place to
on,
put
don't
it.
you, Ruthann? Yeah, yeah.
Well,
But
You
it's
know-
it's a need. It's a need in our area.
I know.
We're fortunate. I mean,
certainly.
our schools are the center of the community.
They are.
We don't have community rec centers around. The schools are the center of the community here, and we certainly get use out of them, and I appreciate that.
So we'll follow up then, Tim, on the
Yeah,
On the funding
I'll
issues?
follow up, and we'll have further discussions and see, what's possible and whether or not it's something that
Just-
we can possibly work out.
let me know how I can help and gathering data for you. Also, within this conversation, we have a need behind our middle school. This is a real need. First, let me start by saying how much I appreciate the work of our cooks, the work of Max Cartwright, our head chef, our food service director, runs a phenomenal program. And with that phenomenal program has come an increase in participation. Students are buying a lot of food, okay? This year has been a bit of an anomaly because basically all students receive their meals, but that hasn't stopped them from buying the extras, okay? They buy the extra a la carte items, they buy the snacks, and so Max continually shows this revenue increase within the program. With participation, the area that has given us the greatest pain points this year is really associated with our service lines at the middle school. We knew when we renovated that middle school, we had very limited space to work with, unless we were going to do a large addition, and we chose not to do that. So we have what we have with respect to space available to serve children there. And that has increased to the point where it's very difficult to get kids in and out of that program for food. And when I say difficult on the cooking staff, because if you remember when we renovated the middle school, the plan was for that to be only a serving kitchen. That's why it's smaller, okay? And they were to do a lot of cooking at the high school and then transport hot meals over in boxes with the truck to be served out of those lines. That was the general plan. It worked pretty good, but participation has really taken off. And so we are to the point now where it's become more of a cooking kitchen, a preparation kitchen. And a review of the numbers with Max has made it very clear to us that what he really needs is storage space. There's just no room to put a cooler in the building there anywhere. There's really no room just outside the building without putting it on the concrete or interrupting that drive that was put in due to our need to accommodate AEP's request to get large trucks in there to serve the transformer, which was new behind that middle school at the time of construction. So we had to put a beefed up driveway, and we certainly don't want to compromise that. So there is a space that is directly behind the middle school, between the greenhouse and the pad, the back door to this serving kitchen, if you will, that would be available to build a small pole facility with proper concrete, electric, to handle a freezer, a refrigerator, and I'm talking a walk-in refrigerator, and dry storage. That would be close enough proximity to provide for Max's needs, not only now, but in the relatively distant future, depending on how many children we're going to put into this campus. And that's a discussion that we have planned for later in committee. So when you take a look at all the facts, there's just no doubt that we need to do something to help them with storage for next year, because they're really pressed to get the job done. He's very concerned about this. I don't see Max get too concerned about things, but he's very concerned about this one, and I agree with him. I have shared a drawing. I'm not sure if it's gone to the whole board to show a general idea. Tim, did I give you a copy of that?
I haven't seen it.
The pencil drawing? Okay. Anyway, in general, what we're looking at, where the space is now used for the shed that houses, the heated shed that houses the wrestling mats. There is ample room there to construct this pole facility with concrete to house the equipment. Max has the money in the budget to help support this project. I'm here tonight to ask you for serious consideration for us to study it further and come with a formal proposed recommendation, if you will, by maybe sooner than the June meeting, to get it in your hands to proceed with this, because it is a need. The question then becomes, what do you do with the shed for the wrestling mats? Okay. One thought is that we would store it and run electric to it out of the maintenance building on one side of the maintenance. We need to discuss that further. But we would be able to maintain the heated shed over on the maintenance building site. That's one option that's been proposed to us. We do need to keep those mats warm in the winter, otherwise they crack. Until we decide how we're going to make other decisions relative to the wrestling program, the logistics associated with it. As you know, we've made use of we call it the barn, at JYA field this year, and it's worked out fairly well. Those mats then would have to be moved only at the time where we're setting up the JYA barn for practices, and also into the building should there be any tournaments. I think they have their annual tournament in a typical year over in the middle school building, so we'd have to transport them. So the transportation in and out is nowhere near where it used to be for the mats, and it's not good to move them a lot anyway, but we're not seeing where moving that shed to the site of the maintenance building would be negative really in any way, and it would open up that space for this building.
Is that shed wired 110 or 220? Is it, do we have to, if we put it by the maintenance building, we'd need to run a
Right.
220 line?
We've discussed this, yes,
Okay.
and you would be able to pull from that building enough to run it. I doubt if that heater's 220.
I doubt it
I
too.
don't know.
We looked at it
But we
when
could
we
check.
first put
It'd
it
just be a
in,
matter
but I
of a
don't,
double
I think
breaker
it's
versus
110.
single breaker
Mhm.
coming off the sub panel in that maintenance building.
They've got
Mhm.
enough open panels. in
I
there
think,
for it.
I think we built some extra in there.
That'd be the only concern, is
Yeah.
if we don't have enough power in there.
I'm not saying that's where it needs to go. I'm just saying that's been
I like it
proposed.
over there as opposed to other real estate because we don't have any place to put it.
Correct.
So,
And let's go ahead and dovetail this other, because Tim, you had suggested we talk about this greenhouse as well, because that's in the same proximity behind the middle school to where I'm speaking. The greenhouse has not been used for a number of years. I hear from year to year different teachers say, boy, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to do that. Okay. From middle school teachers to high school teachers, there's a lot of good ideas out there to use the greenhouse to help teach children. Everything from science to technology to ag to. So while we've heard those ideas, we knew that during the renovation phase, we needed to address electrical issues that were in that greenhouse. Remember that, Ruth Ann? We had to go in and the electric was horrible. So we did address those electric issues, and the electric was redone to and in to the greenhouse and inside the greenhouse. There was an issue of exhaust fan that I think was resolved. So, Tim, when you brought this up, saying there were some questions regarding that, I reached out to those who had previously shared, hey, we'd like to do this or that, and then it kind of died. And I learned today, as a matter of fact, that when that renovation of middle school was performed, the line that fed that greenhouse with water was shut down. I did not know that or remember that. And that was brought up today, that if it is used, we've got to get water back out there to use it. How might it be used if we keep it? Okay. I know for a fact that Jolie Jungers, the middle school arts teacher, really into community gardening, and has actually been in initial phases of discussions with Mrs. Almendinger and Christy Rose and some others regarding starting something akin to what Granville has with their students, that they start plants and they grow. They learn the value of community gardening. And she is someone who's expressed interest in starting a club if they had the teachers volunteer to do that. And I know those are in discussions. I've had the ag department talk in past years about going in and fostering lessons in gardening as well. I know she does the lettuce up here in the room with, I believe it's hydroponically grown plants. And and we've had one other teacher at the middle school a couple years ago that said, boy, I'd like to go out and start growing plants. Can we get electric? And I said, well, electric's been done and it's just never been developed. Okay, the ideas. So we would need to get water if the board would choose to leave that greenhouse. We would need to have further discussions to generate interest in making sure it's used going forward. I like some of the concepts that Jolie had shared via Chris to me. And you can go on the Granville site. I can send it out to you and see how they use it. They do a lot of plant starts. And Jolie talks about growing into programs where students learn how to compost. We could use scraps from the lunchroom or cafeteria, teaching children how to compost, grow this out, maybe even open up community gardens on the grounds somewhere. And we don't have a lot of footprint. We don't have a lot of space, right? Where becomes a question. So all that would need to be planned out, and that greenhouse certainly would have a role in at least starting from seed, plants that then could be transferred out or sold. So that's what I know.
Yeah, the
about
question
the
I've got on
greenhouse.
that is, and you'll have to send me the Granville stuff, is, I mean, I garden. Unless you're growing lettuce, by the time school lets out,
Yeah.
nothing is
done.
up.
It's
fried.
Lettuce is about the only thing you can grow by this time of the year and eat.
I know Granville's
So-
incorporated
Any core
somehow
crops,
into their
yeah.
food. They use it in the lunch program, and kids are able to use that and eat it. And
That's
it's on
must-
their website. I
They
can
must
look it
have a
up for you.
total controlled environment to do that in their
Yeah.
greenhouse.
Right.
And this is not total controlled by any
Yeah,
means.
No, it has
Cool and everything
heat.
else. I just question, I mean, if you're I don't want people starting a program and then all summer long, nothing's in there except rotting, if you're doing tomatoes.
Well, certainly if you're doing a
Everything's just
community
gonna-
garden program, it's going to have to run through the summer, and you've
Right.
got. And I think Jolie's what she had proposed again to Chris and to me was offering it as a student-led club, much like many of these are. So I just wanted to report to you what I've learned.
I wanted the board to hear this right now. We go back there, it's being used as storage. it's sitting on valuable land. We either need to do something with it or move it. I mean, that's where I'm at with it, because it's sitting right at the middle school where as tight as can be back there, and to have it sitting there, not really fulfilling an educational need or a space need, makes it difficult to not address. So really, I just wanted this to foster some communication and
Sure.
bring it up to people that, in my mind, we need to do something with it. We have to make a decision what's viable, whether or not we've got educational opportunity for it, and if we don't, we don't. I mean, if there's just not a club that's available that's going to make good use out of it, but realizing we have what we have back there, we're not going to be able to put a controlled environment in there where we're going to heat and cool that thing all the time and do, it is what it is.
Right.
But
It's quite an investment.
Yeah.
In a
Yes.
few plants. It
Yeah.
really is quite, but it's meaningful. I understand that because I have a garden as well. So I understand it. But in the configuration of what you tentatively designed for back of the building, did you consider where the food service personnel currently park? Would that be of any use to, I'm looking for the least amount of steps, the best service, wherever we can put that freezer and refrigerator and storage, whatever, so that we don't have to walk too far to go through 2 doors to get that back into the cafeteria for use.
Yeah.
So
Max
I don't know,
actually-
I haven't seen any of them, so I'm just curious, which side did you go on, and did you prefer that side toward the greenhouse because that affords us the best transportation opportunity, transfer opportunity?
Max agreed that the space I've described here heretofore would work fine because you'd be able to come out the doors, you have his dry, his freezer, his cool storage, and right out the doors and right into the door in the back. And I'm looking to see if.
How much space did you draw? Did it take both the gray shed space,
Just-
real
just-
estate,
Just the shed space.
just the shed
I can
space?
share this with you. He has proposed a 20 by 30 building. And I've gone over this with Dave Jenny as well, to have him start getting his eyes on it and make recommendations. Because we also have to be mindful that we have to be so far away from our existing building and meet code and all of that. And he was looking into the beefed up concrete that would be needed to properly house these coolers. I'll share this with you. I would like this back. This is Max's original, but it's 20 by 30. Our existing building is 14 by 28. So it's a little bigger. Look at that, pass it around. That'll give you an idea of the concept that he has proposed.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to the greenhouse for a second. So has anybody monitored what heat is actually being made in that facility? Does anybody know? No one knows.
Short of the electric work, Alan, no more work on that building has been.
Because, you could do starter points if it maintains some kind of heat. I just don't know restrictions. Yeah, it just depends on whether you can keep it from freezing. There's passive ways of generating heat too, right? So it just depends. You don't have to have it so warm. You just have to not have it freeze. You can start tomato plants.
Well, you also have to
Is
have
that-
something to do with them after you start all this.
Right.
I just don't want to be
Sell 'em.
growing something just to grow it and then throw it
We'd have
out.
to
We have
cool
to
that
find a,
area when, we'd have to
Place
cool
to
it during those
transplant,
hot
yeah, all
runs,
that.
plus the watering. Somebody's got to be responsible
Yeah,
for it.
but it depends on whether people, we one time were an agricultural community. We changed something, right? I'm an agricultural person. So, it just depends. It is an asset. Or it's either an asset or a liability, one of the two, right?
Yep.
So we need to determine, is it an asset? If it's not, then we need to get rid of it. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
Who can make that judgment call to determine whether it's an asset or not?
Can anybody here address, because I honestly, I haven't looked back in time, when it was put in and how it was used? Anybody here tonight that, the ag teacher used it for growing plants? and they'd sell them and then kind of use those funds to help propagate the program? Okay.
It's just, it's sitting there and we're not getting any value
Yeah,
out of
we
it.
need
And
it,
it's
it's got
eating up goods.
storage.
And
It's-
Alan's right. It's either an asset or a liability and we have to make a decision. So I'd like to,
Let me ask for proposals,
that's right.
okay,
was
if
gonna
I
say, yeah,
could,
if you
on
can
how
find
this could
proposals so
become.
we can then assess it and determine whether or not it's viable.
We'll
I mean,
have it
Alan,
looked
to your
at.
answer, it's us that has to make the decision whether or not it's viable.
But we just don't know enough information.
Right.
And
to
then
make
I'm,
that decision.
and then I'm curious what it would take and cost to get water running back to that.
Well, we'll pursue it. That's the purpose of tonight is, do you want me
Yeah.
to pursue it? Get information. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll gather the information and we'll share it with the board and make a future decision with respect to that building. Okay. Now, within the food storage building, what's the pleasure of the board? Shall I proceed to
I guess,
work
is
with
there any
Dave or have Dave-
objection to
There's
the
no-
food? I know we
I don't
need it.
object, I know we need it. I
It's just
just
if you can start
don't know how
working
to
on
do it.
details and then bring back cost and location and all those.
You've got it. You've
Yep.
got it. I just didn't want to pursue it if there's no will to do so.
I don't
Okay.
think we have a choice.
I
Matt's
don't think we
budget is pretty, can really go a long way in funding this, right?
Oh,
I think you said it's in
absolutely.
the budget already.
He
I
has
mean,
the money in the
It is not
budget.
already in the budget, but it's in the cash
He's-
balance.
He
Now-
can cover it.
Now, some of that budget is
Right,
earmarked
already
for equipment at
earmarked.
the CIRFOS,
Right.
but he
Right.
also has the money. He's done very good with the budgeting of the food service. And so, yes, the money's there for the freezer and the cooler. And we need to ascertain the actual cost for the building to contain those and then see where we stand. But I didn't want to go down that avenue unless you as a board
And
agreed.
I'd like to repeat my earlier comment a couple weeks ago. Can any of the ESSA funds, since we are mandated to feed students free lunches for the rest of 2022, can that be a part of our project? Because we're out of space to feed those people,
That's a great
all
question.
those
That is an
students. So
excellent
why
question.
can't we use ESSA funds
I will
to
research
pay
that.
for either building it or stocking it?
That's creative in that has created the issue.
Sure, with all the students receiving free meals,
Right,
and it
they're
looks
all-
as
we-
though
we
that's
don't
all
have
through
any
next year,
It is,
for
yeah,
sure.
June of 2022.
We
And
don't
is that
have any
breakfast and lunch?
space to feed them. We don't have
We may-
any storage
No
to
one's
store the
packing.
food.
Got more people to feed through there.
So it's
sounds like a
costing,
good
not
argument to
only
me.
costing us, but it's,
Right.
we're limited.
Yeah, so long as we can do that and justify it within the ESSER guidelines, when it's audited, she's
Right.
not on the hook, we'll look into that.
Kim, we'll,
That's a good
we'll try to
idea.
keep you off the hook, but we're going to let you swing a little.
That's super creative.
That's an excellent idea.
So,
The ESSER funds, not me swinging it away. Clear that up.
I'll just say Kim said it.
just give me just a quick second here.
Thanks, Mr. Dixon.
Clever.
Okay. We will look into that and try to get proposals back to you soon. Anything else with regard to the buildings you wanted to discuss
I think
tonight?
we've got direction. We're good to go.
Thank you. The third item the board wanted to discuss, we've been talking about this for a little while. We've had curriculum committee meetings and we continue to hear the board's request for balancing math support services, particularly at the elementary now, wherein we have certain programs we've operated for some time now with respect to reading, given the size of the size of the curriculum, the number of things that need to be covered in reading, the third grade guarantee, our Title I reading program, and we have certain resources that we put into reading to get the results we're getting, which are very good. And then it begs the question, what are we doing for math, if I'm understanding the questioning correctly? So we're trying to get at tonight exactly what is the issue we're trying to resolve so that we can adequately plan to address them with proper staffing. What we have provided for you, I know, Tim, I sent it to you, and I think I copied the board to kind of show a history of how we use our personnel for these reading and what
Yeah.
we had for reading and math programs went back to, I think, 2017. I want to thank Marcy and Janet for helping put some of that data together for us to kind of show that progression of how we've addressed reading and math past and how we are now. And so I think it's important before we invest any resources, staff, that we understand what is the issue we're trying to address. And so we're here to hear from you. What questions do you have? What ideas are you thinking about? How might we better address or address it reading and math at the elementary level? I know at the middle school, we've already committed to an additional math teacher at the middle school to address the problems that were perceived to be there. And as you know, we continue to monitor data very carefully about student progress. And I have a team that just does a remarkable job to stay ahead of the progress and the growth. And so we're here to understand better what we're trying to do. What are you trying to do with the questions related to balancing reading and math resources at the elementary? Please.
Well, really, this goes back to when we had those early conversations and middle school said, we've got great reading scores. Math are good, but great reading. And at the middle school, when we added the math, they said, as with everything starts at the elementary. If we can build our kids up at the elementary, then middle school is better prepared when they get there, which middle school improves high school. So each of the building blocks starts at the elementary. So the conversation then went to, why are we great in reading and good in math? What's the difference? And one of the things we found out at that time, I think we had, I don't know the exact numbers, but I want to say we had like 6 parapros in the reading. Is that correct?
6 is
That's
correct.
correct.
6. And what is it? That's what I meant. Yeah. 3 Title I and 3 parapro, 6 people.
That's the federal
Yeah.
program funded teachers.
Correct.
Right. So it makes it look like there's a lot.
But Marcy, to clarify that, you're right, they're Title I, but they still are, we'll call it reading assistant kind of people. I mean, we're putting that into reading.
They're certified teachers.
They're certified teachers.
Yeah.
Yes.
6.
Yeah.
In reading, you have 3 certified and 3 classified. So you have 3 parapros
And then what do we have in
in the
math?
reading. In the math, you currently have 1 certified and 2 classified serving in the math.
Is that right?
Yes, you have Ms. Neal, a certified teacher. You have Mrs. Trail, and you have Mrs. Burkhurst are the classified. And then what I was hearing, you wanted us to investigate what it would look like to balance it out, and thus the sheet that you've received kind of shows maybe what it would look like if we had a couple more certified staff. But we're wondering what we're trying to fix before we would ever come to you with a
Right.
recommendation.
That's a good point,
With
because that
increased
was my
staffing.
question. Why are we looking at math? What isn't working? And if we've got 3 people dedicated to helping our math students, are we making progress? Have we made progress? Did we see the test scores? Or I don't even want to say test scores. Did we see math growth that you're happy with? And if so, could you share that with us?
Could I? Let's
Okay.
We felt that this general look at our spring iReady testing K through 8. This includes all students K through 8. So, look real carefully up here. On the top tiers, on that pyramid, you see the mathematics K through 8 expressed as tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 students. Again, you know, we do these diagnostic tests in the fall and in the winter and in the spring. Okay? These were the spring results. And Marcy and Janet at the elementary and Chris at the middle school carefully monitor every student's progress using these iReady data diagnostics. And then they share these results with their teachers, and they work together to determine strategies to help those students who are struggling grow as much as they possibly can. And so what you see in the upper section there with mathematics, again, K through 8, this is a total student look of K through 8, you find that we have 7% of our students at risk, meaning they're not working at grade level, okay? Tier 2 are those students who are next closest to, and I'm sorry, I have my notes mixed up here, are within a grade level or as much as a grade level below. Then you have those who are green, and they the ones that are on grade level. So if you look at the current data of our students currently in K through 8, you'll find that 68% of our students are very much on grade level, 25% are within a year, and 7% are not on grade level. And the principals know that, the teachers know that, they'll strategize, and then they go in and intervene with intervention with these parapros. Now, that's really not bad. If you take a look at the bottom, reading, from the spring diagnostics, you see that 9% of our students are at risk in reading. You see that 17% are within a grade level, but not at grade level. And you see in tier 1, these are students that have reached grade level or exceeded grade level. Those are 74% of your students. So overall, these are remarkably good scores. And one can see from this general view that reading is actually a little bit behind math when we look at K through 8 together. Debbie, we didn't put, did you put the subsequent slides on here? Okay.
Are you going to have to explain how reading is? I just added up. You got 26% below reading and you got 32%. You're just talking about tier 3 only.
That's correct.
Okay. I consider tier 2 and tier 3 to be better. That's why I was asking. I've added tier 1, tier 2 and 3 together.
Right. The other point that I'm making, and I'm speaking very generally here too, but the amount of information that within our curriculum in reading, language arts, far exceeds the amount of that curriculum in math. Am I correct in saying that way, Marcy, Janet? There's more standards to meet.
Those bars out to the side are all of the components. So you have the domains at the top for math. You have numbers and operation, algebraic thinking, measurement, and geometry. Bottom, the domains in language arts, you have phonological awareness, phonics, high frequency words, vocabulary, comprehension of literature and comprehension of informational text. So there's a lot more standards and domains for English language arts.
So down at fourth grade, we have assessed and total. You can see, again, we're looking at pull this back down here so we can see what we're looking at mathematics K through 8. And if you look at each grade level, you can see how the trend flows on these bar graphs. And you get a few more students as they get older. When they get to middle school, this is a trend we see in a lot of districts, actually. Okay, as students grow, they go into middle school. It's a change of environment. It's a change of interest. It's a change, and we see the numbers of students slightly increase. And so we need to provide more and more interventions for them to address those needs. But it's not to the point that I would say that we have a really bad crisis going on with respect to math and language arts with these percentage of students succeeding.
I think that's one, I mean, it's good and great. Trying to get great.
Absolutely. So and that begs the question, Tim, then, and that's really why we showed these. I'm sorry, we got I was able to review these this afternoon.
I was just, is this
But
spring?
This is the latest
Okay,
spring.
this-
Yeah,
we
we're
didn't
just
see these.
and we'll know more when we get our state test in too. Later in the summer.
Hey, Gail, do you mind scrolling back to that last one?
Absolutely. You want the
This year, the eight, this year.
yeah.
Do you have that in reading as well?
Yes.
Keep going.
You see the same phenomenon. Yeah.
I guess reading, I'm looking at 7th and 8th grade.
Yep.
59 and 67. I think we both agree. We have 60 and 40. 68 and 40. I'm just looking at the green level there. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess, what do you, I don't know. I mean, what do we suggest? How do we get?
Well, that's why we're trying to ascertain what the goal is here, because Tim, we can add resources. We can add teachers. It has implications for our schedules and what we do. Great implications for our master scheduling and how we're going to get the kids, and then, the space problems we are challenged with. And we certainly can put more resources, staffing resources in there. We need to know what the expectations of this board are in order to properly plan for that proper staffing and what they're actually going to do when they get to the building. I just hate adding staff unless we have that clear vision together.
I guess my question is,
Yeah.
all right, so if we look at the 6th, 7th, and 8th math in the spring, we just were adding the additional, does that additional math teacher, do we think it'll directly affect these, or is it better spent, are investments better spent K to 5 or 6 through 8? That's the simplest.
Here's what we understood the goal.
Advice.
Here's what we understood the goal to be, okay, with respect to the middle school. When we added the math teacher, it was that all the students would get equal time in the classroom, wherein we had it scheduled where the students who were not struggling, those who were considered advanced, were actually having less time with the teacher in the way the schedule was configured. It wasn't so much that we were addressing a negative data showing our students were failing.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't want to ever make it sound like that. Again, I do people, it's good and great. I guess, Dale, could you show us the spring scores from last year? And I don't mean this,
Sure,
Just like
What's the
athletics,
trending?
academics, You have classes that go up and down, you know what I mean?
sure.
So,
They didn't do the test.
Because last year
2 years.
was an anomaly.
yeah,
Yes,
2 years back.
please. Marcy's brought some
And
information.
the reason I say that, and, you know, there's classes that excel academically and athletically, and ebbs and flows just like anything else. I don't want to look at one snapshot in time of one class and make a decision.
Right.
But if we see, you know, if it's year over year, that's what I'd like to address. I don't want to make a decision based on one class going through because it may just be one class going through.
That is correct. And that's what we look at as well. And Marcy, some comments relative to what you asked.
So this is what you were kind of, I think, asking for.
Can you speak? I can hear.
Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
This is not a good year to be comparing data because we were making up for a gap, right? That was caused by the school closure. And so the first page you're looking at is fall to spring growth for this current school year. So it's very similar, except for this is only K-5, where with what Mr. Dixon was sharing was K-8. So in K-5, what you see is reading. That students this year, in the fall, it's the more shaded out part, 47% came in on grade level after the closure. We grew them to 80% on grade level. So that's the growth. In math, 26% came in on grade level. And you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot fewer students on grade level. But here's what I would like to point out with math. As we look at those domains, in the elementary grades, we spend a lot of time, especially in the primary grades. I won't speak as much for what 3 through 5. But the largest part of math at the foundational levels is numbers and operations and algebraic thinking. Most of the teachers have their pacing done so that geometry and measurement standards take place later in the school year. So that took place after the school closure. So that 26% coming in the fall on grade level, you have to remember that we had 2 entire domains that almost didn't get addressed. So we grew to 74% on grade level. So we were able to really close that gap. If you turn the page, you'll see last school year, again, like you were just pointing out, we could only show fall to winter. We did not take the diagnostic in the spring because we were closed. But nonetheless, we started last year at 47% on grade level and grew to 73. So I think by fall, we're usually kind of where we are at in the spring. Again, that's the COVID pandemic ramifications of that. Last year in math, we grew from 32 to 61 just by winter. Okay, so yes, math is always just a few percentage points behind. Where I think you really can do some good comparisons is when you go to 18-19 and 17-18. So that's where you can really compare, because in 18-19 in fall, from 46% on grade level to 87, and 36% to 83. And then in our very first year ever in the building, 2017-18, 50% on grade level to 86, 37% to 82. So at K-5, our math and reading are not all that different, and that is actually with less support at math over the years. In 17-18, we only had 1 math specialist, because at Oregon, we had a math specialist, and it's your fuss they didn't. And when we merged the 2 buildings, we were able to use that. Janet and I and the entire staff look at the data and say, where is the need? So in the first year there, the need was, we thought grades 3 through 5. So we used our math specialist at grades 3 through 5. In our second year there, we used our math specialist at 2nd through 5. And then last year, before the closure, we were able to, you guys graciously hired Shayna Trail in October of last year, and we were able to use our math specialist in Shayna as a parapro for 1st through 5. And then we closed. And then this year, Mrs. Barkhurst was hired. Or was that last year? No, this year. It's a long time. This year always kind of runs into last year. So that just kind of shows the trends over time that we've kind of been on par until the COVID closure.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Again, board, I apologize a bit here because we actually didn't prepare a presentation for tonight. It's just in seeing this data and knowing this topic, we wanted to get it before you, if only in basic format right now, because we're still pouring over it. So it would be nothing to get the same data. However, we can only go back with the middle school so far because we just instituted IRED last year. Okay, this is the value we get from our diagnostics in this district, and it's paying dividends and helping us understand these trends. It takes some years to get it in place and then get programs in place. So in short, relative to this conversation this evening, please don't see us standing here recommending we add 2 math teachers at the elementary. Okay, they were in our planning. We took a look at what could be if truly the goal was to balance the staffing out and the interventions for the students out with personnel, then certainly we could go there and we can cost that out. As I stand here today, knowing that we still have some more conversations to have with our team relative to this issue, if this board were to ask me, Mr. Dixon, what are we going to do for next year? Based on what I've learned thus far, I would think that we would look at perhaps 1 additional math teacher at our elementary for next year and consider paying for that teacher out of our ESSER dollars for the next 3 years, which we can do, correct? And we use that teacher in a way to help close what gaps that we do have, even though they're not atrocious. I'll tell you what, when we're on with iReady and they're looking at us compared to the trends they're seeing in the nation, you heard at a previous board meeting when Mrs. Seibel presented. They are astonished at the achievement that we've had this year. And their words were, I think I'm quoting it correctly, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So to your point, Tim, if we can have a little extra staff, certainly we can get better. We're doing good. Would an additional staff member help us provide more interventions? Yes. How that looks, we'd have to go to the drawing board to most effectively determine how to support our current teachers with that staff member, because we don't know what that looks like to be able to describe that to you. So when we look at balancing reading and math, I just want us to be aware of the data that we're seeing, and I don't want us to throw staff at a problem with one, not clearly understanding what the problem is we're trying to address, and 2, spending money unwisely. And together we can solve this. But I wanted to understand what you're trying to address. Janet, if you're going to speak, could you come up here, please, and speak into the mic so that they can hear you?
First of all, thank you for considering this and looking at the data with us. I think there are a lot of encouraging things. When we look at the kind of math support, what I believe Marcy and I both agree on would be really beneficial would be to have someone have 2 teachers that maybe one could be a K through 2, one could be a 3 through 5, or we might have both of them serve K through 5 based again on the data. There might be a year when there needs to be more grades 3 and 4. There might be a year when there needs to be more 1 and 2, and we would have the flexibility to put more resources in there. I just want to reference those trends that you see with a little bit of the red growing as we go from K and higher. And I don't want to speak for the middle school, but I think you probably will agree with me. I think as students get older, I don't think this, I know this, that number sense and operations in math is the same as phonics in reading. And studies show that students' number sense before they come to school is a greater predictor of their success in school than even their language acquisition. So what we find as the students get older, not because they're not being instructed properly, but because our tier 2 students are students who need more time to grasp the grade level material. As the students get older and their numbers and operations may not be at grade level, somehow we have to find that extra time for them to go back and continue to work at those skills so we can keep them at grade level. The gap obviously gets wider as we get higher up in grades, right? The 5th grade is doing multiplying decimals, and they are multiplying fractions and mixed numbers. And a student who is still struggling somewhat with some basic number sense will have a hard time acquiring those skills. So the gap gets a little wider as the students get older. Would you agree with that from the middle school? And so I think that's why you see that red grow a little bit. So I know from my perspective, that person would be someone who could help those students that for whom the gap is getting wider between where they are with their numbers and operations and algebraic thinking and where the curriculum is. It would be nice if we could stop the math curriculum for those students, but we can't because of those wonderful assessments that they all have to take. And so that's a real need. And whenever we came together as an elementary school, we decided to put that one resource that we had toward those students. But the risk you run when you do that then is you're not intervening for the students at the foundational level when you can actually stop that gap from creating in the first place. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and we chose to go 3 through 5. Please keep in mind that this year with all of our JLA and everything, we did not have a math intervention person this year. She's teaching 1st grade. And so not only were we trying to make up for what we lost at the end of last year, we didn't have as much personnel doing that. And the person that, thank you, that you hired, Mrs. Barkhurst, also was not totally devoted to math because she was doing intervention online with our JLA students. So we had to, use our personnel differently. But in our conversations, the use for those 2 people would be for those students for whom that gap is growing and getting them while they're still in the yellow so that they don't move to the red.
Let me clarify, and perhaps the board has the same question. When you're referring to 2 people, are you referring to the 2 potential additional?
We're talking about, right now, we were talking about just a total of 2, including
With
the
one
that we have.
additional teacher would be adequate enough to meet this need for next year and possibly the next 2 to 3 years. And because it is directly related to the gap, we think we can use the funds that we're required to use. Remember, 20% of these ESSER funds must be dedicated to closing the gap. We think that 1 might be enough to meet the needs. And I want to make sure I'm speaking correctly because, again, we're looking at this data just recently, and I want to make sure I'm covering your needs properly.
Yeah.
Marcy.
So, yeah, I think what Jana just said is amazing, right? Because you look at the growth this year from 26% to 74%. And that was without any additional math support. So we made that growth with no small groups. We didn't service math this year because, much like the very beginning of this meeting, our JLA teachers were used for JLA. So our current math specialist, who is Kim Neal, who I'm just going to publicly say has been amazing because she started the year JLA teaching 1st and 2nd grade math, switched in the middle of the year and became in-person 1st grade, and now is going back to math specialist next year. Again, we're utilizing her based on the data. So she will come back to math, K through 5, and then if we could have Shayna, who also didn't service very many math students this year because we were making up for some deficits in reading. And then Lindsay did sometimes. So we would have the two of them come back to math. They would be the two classified. If we add one certified teacher, they would do the same role as what Kim does. They would be a K through 5 math specialist. So what we would have then at JES would be 2 K through 5 math certified specialists and 2 parapros supporting them.
Where would you put the other person? I mean, not to,
On the roof.
okay, I mean,
Next
And
year will
that's-
be our biggest challenge.
and that's what I was just gonna say, I mean, not to sound like we don't wanna
No,
do something
we have
next
the
year.
same-
This may have to fall into the
Mhm.
intermediate school expansion conversation and what we're doing there. It just may have to go to there because
That's a broad, yes, there's a lot to that.
I think from my standpoint, I really appreciate everything, and I think I just need some time to digest some of this information,
Yeah.
get some questions back,
Sure.
and this gets included into the intermediate school conversation about how we're staffing up there and what we're gonna
Correct.
do, because
We
while
will
I
find
would
the
love to add
space.
somebody if we have no place for them.
We'll find the space.
Okay.
We are using
What I'm hearing
every.
is-
You already
Do
have
you know
them
the
in-
little alcove
Right.
outside of my office where the little alcove is?
Yeah.
It's a classroom right now. So we will find the space.
Yeah. Right.
They
The,
can find a
um,
way to get the interventions to these
Mhm.
students, Tim, no question, for next year, if an additional specialist were to be approved. The point I would make with regard to that is, we would want to move fairly soon, because we're losing candidates as we sit here. Good math candidates, tough to
Well,
find.
I guess I also
So-
don't want to move too soon in the sense I need to.
Yep.
I need to
Because it
digest.
doesn't
I get
sound
it.
like we have a huge problem down there with math. This is definitely going to enhance it, but it's also not like we're, trying to solve an issue. So I don't know about the rest of the board, but I think it's going to take a little bit of reading of my.
Sure,
and if you
Sure, that's fully
Somewhere.
understandable. And also put into the mix as we look at next year is, and that 20% we must spend on GAP, we are still needing a lot of work on seeing what after-school help for students looks like, and
Okay.
what staffing might be available to help there, and how we might pay for that with these funds. So we have a lot of work to do this summer with that regard. But we do think those are reasonable ways to use the gap closing money. Again, you could support a math teacher for the next 2 to 3 years under ESSER. It's a 3-year math rollout. We have to spend it within 3. The other thing we have to submit before August, I think, August 24th. This is different with these ESSER funds, this third round, because we must state our plan, and then we cannot change it once we set the plan. We've had some flexibility with previous funding. Once we set what we're going to do, if we say we want a math teacher for the next 3 years, that's what we have to do with the money. If we want after-school programming to
Well,
help
that's
with
why I
more
think
intervention.
it flows into that intermediate conversation.
Right.
because if we're hiring somebody, we're not hiring them for 2 or 3 years. We're hiring them to keep them. And after the
That's
ESSER funding's
correct.
gone, we have to make sure it's budgeted in our budget long-term, so.
Yeah, then it becomes an issue down the road of if that math specialist is determined not to be needed for interventions, they need to be absorbed into the regular teaching staff as we grow and need more
Right,
teachers.
and it becomes we'll call it an unfunded mandate, which is kind of has
Right.
happened to
right.
many schools, and then they can't absorb it after the 3rd or 4th year. They find they can't absorb what was given to them, which looked like a gift, but
Yep.
it isn't a gift. But if you need it, then you should use it. So I'm like Tim, I need to read this, and I've seen it, so.
Yep.
And I really appreciate the breakdown.
Do we have the resources to put in the classroom, like the tables, the desks, whatever we're going to use?
Yes.
For the,
Yes, we're
we've got
good.
all that. So we just need.
Yes.
When I look at the data, though, the data would suggest that we have an engagement problem both in language arts and in math in middle school, right? If you look at.
That's
growth,
what I see it in
right,
the middle
That's what I
school.
saw. When I looked
Mhm.
at the data. What can we do to help enhance the engagement of our students? That's a really broad question. Doesn't the data suggest that everything's trending okay? We feel great, and then we're getting to where we're much larger groups.
A whole lot of change occurring, elementary to middle school. It's a whole different dynamic we
I
deal
think to
with.
support Ellen, though, I feel like we ought to be able to try to identify, we should work hard to identify what is that ingredient that obviously there are a lot of them when they become middle schoolers, but how can we better address that? Is it more paraprofessionals in middle school? Is it more concentration of one-to-one? I don't know, but I was looking at that data and feeling the same way. So I'm anxious to hear your responses, maybe not tonight, but
Are there other things that we can do in middle school to try to help? Because that's where the gap in the culture is becoming more of an issue. Am I misinterpreting the data? We're seeing the same thing in language arts too, if I remember things right. So I didn't think it was statistically really that different. I thought it was a lot of engagement in both areas.
It's good discussion.
good discussion. I
And-
need to hear more for middle school. I'm anxious to hear more about the trending for middle school so I can understand it a little better.
And we'll learn more as we implement this for more years and stay up with this diagnosing. And then we get our data back from our testing this year. I'm anxious kind of to see that from our state testing.
I appreciate it.
Question? Yeah,
No.
thank you for,
I mean, this is some of the conversation went on at the curriculum committee, and I just thought it'd be good for the whole board to hear everything as
Sure.
we get asked to, make more decisions.
For sure.
All right, with that, Mr. Dixon, you want to go into your recommendations?
yeah, and I do try to stay away from action items on work session nights like these, but on this one, we have the announced sunsetting of the orders that were put in place back in August of 2020 with respect to facial coverings in the schools. As a matter of fact, June 2nd, as of June 2nd, the all orders for schools relative to the COVID-19 pandemic are being sunsetted. And so with that, then, we did put into place last year policy 845001, and that is basically covering that mandate that was given to us in August, and I'm asking the board to rescind that policy this evening. We'll keep it in the wings if, God forbid, we do need to use it in the future. But for now, that policy will sunset or should sunset with the sunsetting of the state orders. So I recommend that to you this evening for action.
Yeah, with pleasure. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Go ahead.
Any discussion?
No, let's.
Yes.
Let's.
Roll call,
Mr. Beck?
please.
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swanger.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any objection out there?
At
They
this time,
love
I'd like
those
to go
minutes.
into executive session.
For the purpose
Personnel.
of personnel issues.
So moved.
Mr. Benton.
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swanger.
Yes.
8:05.
No action afterwards.
No action to follow.
Correct.
And we can just stay in here, if
Yep.
you will.